welcome everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Paul. Boy, it's good to be here today. I've been away for another week. It seems like I've been gone most of the summer, but I'm back for a while now. I'm looking forward to it. Our special guest today, Dave Buck. He and I will chat about the details of retirement. And most of the details don't have anything to do with finances, because people think finance and retirement are sisters. They are, but there's a lot more involved. And Dave has written a book titled The Time Optimized Life that gets into this for not just for retired people, but for all of us. And he writes this: retirement usually represents a significant change in lifestyle. Most traditional planning leading up to retirement centers on having the necessary financial resources to last the remainder of a person's lifespan. However, much less focus is placed on how one lives and the time when they choose to spend those resources. The transition to this new life can be a challenge. Today, we will pinpoint areas of activities that will maximize the retirement experience. With that, let's bring on our guest. Dave Buck, welcome to the next chapter with Charlie.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. That's nice that you're honored. I'm honored that you're honored. We can play a mutual honor game here. You know how I want to start? As I read the paragraph that you wrote, a couple of questions came to mind, and I wonder that I think could generate some conversation. And you begin with a statement: retirement usually represents a significant change in lifestyle. And maybe it does for a lot of people. It didn't for me, David. Many of the things that we will discuss today, I've been doing most of them for more than 40 years. We're going to talk about personal mission statements, budgets, travel desires. I've been doing that. My life is not that much different, except for, I don't want to call it geography, except for the venues that I serve. Instead of serving for-profit businesses, I serve nonprofit businesses. So I'm wondering, is it always, or is that really common that retirement is a significant change in lifestyle?
Yes, because many still have the all or nothing approach, where you are in the minority on how people live their life in retirement, though that is beginning to change. If you look at the traditional retirement model, it's I saved my money for a period of time until either I had enough financial resources, I had a pension, whatever that was, that then said I stopped working. And that has been the challenge for many as they choose to do this binary view of retirement that says either I'm going to work in career and then I'm going to stop post-career. That's where the change happens, because if you devote 48 hours of your week, your job, and you sleep 7 hours a night, that's 40% of your awake time is in your job. If you go cold turkey and you don't plan, that's a significant change in your lifestyle.
Yeah, if you go cold turkey and don't plan, I think that's a great caveat. And that's what I want to focus our time on today, is you have tools, expertise, experience at talking about how do you plan for retirement. And I really like your approach to where you elevate your preparations for retirement from strictly financial goals to ones that account for your contributions to society as well as to your own life of pleasure. And I like that approach. Talk to me about that.
Sure. We both, you mentioned at the top that I don't handle financials, so I'm not a financial planner or professional. I do think, though, that you should have, you don't feel you have a good handle or an understanding of what your future looks like, I highly encourage seek out a financial professional. Because one of the things I don't want people to do is develop this great lifestyle that they think they want to have, and the resources don't match. But let's set that financial aspect aside a little bit.
Yeah, we'll come back to that a bit later, but let's go ahead. Yeah.
But what you want to establish first and foremost, and you can do this at any time in your life. You don't have to wait till you think about retirement, but one of the terms we all use when we meet somebody for the first time is, usually in the conversation somewhere along the line, somebody says, "What do you do for a living?" And if you're in a career, that's great, because that's an immediate connection point. But if you go into retirement, that could be meaningless because you're not doing anything for a living. It doesn't mean you aren't doing stuff. If you choose not to have a career in the formal sense, then you have to figure out, what does that mean? And a lot of people don't know how to engage. Your question is, I'm just retired. So I challenge people to say, replace the "what do you do for a living" with, what is my purpose in life? That's broader than career, could contain career, but it then opens you up to look at your life through this lens of this purpose that you've developed, to then be able to say, what are the tasks, activities, or things that I'm going to do in my life that fulfills that purpose?
I love that. That's why we'll talk about my difficulties with retirement, but why I don't face such difficulties now, because for 40 years I've written personal mission statements, who I want to be, what do I want to do to accomplish them, because I was always self-employed. I always worked for myself, not always, since I was 40. So for 30 years, I officed out of my house. And so I in order to be structured and meaningful and purposeful, I did create purpose statements and activities. So that wasn't a new outline, although it had a different flavor to it, doesn't it? There's a different flavor when you don't have to work for money.
There is a different flavor, and I also take it back into the career aspect to say, look at many companies, pretty much all of them have either a mission or a vision statement or both. And those, when done well in corporate life, create the lens again through which everyone should operate in there. And I say, why shouldn't that be any different for you? So if it's not a purpose statement, make your vision statement or your mission statement, because then that allows you to then craft around that all the other cool things that you might want to do in professional or personal life.
I get it. I love that. And I want to spend some time on talking about what it means to create a purpose statement. And I think it says easy, does hard, because no one has spent that kind of time, unless they've been on the strategic planning level of businesses. Then they do understand something of planning and objectives and goals and strategies. But otherwise, if you have not, if you've been more in a get or done sort of phase, then now you're on your own, and there's really great help needed. That's why your services are so valuable.
Thank you. And it was, for me, a journey in and of itself to come up with a purpose statement, because so much of what my life was and still is defined around, quote, the work that I do. And I derive a lot of personal purpose and satisfaction from that. And that's where I want to give people the grace to say, particularly those who feel pressured to go into retirement, then to say, work doesn't have to stop in retirement.
No.
What I want people to do is to say, how do I have a life of flexibility that I can do what I want to do? And if work's part of that, awesome. But if it's not, you want more time to do other personal stuff, yay. That's where the lifestyle planning comes in.
Yeah, I like that you had said, you used a really, I think, a fun quote. You said, you're not a strong advocate of work-life balance, but an advocate of work-life flexibility. I think there's a big difference there. That's very cool.
Yes, because too many people, I don't know about you and your listeners, but I have a hard time staying in balance. And the principle of staying in balance, even if you look at nature, I know it seeks balance, but getting there is very hard, and then staying there. There's always some external thing that happens. So that's where I try to tell people in career or post-career, whatever it is, seek this work-life flexibility so that you can live into each side of your life, but you build relationship capital in both sides of your life. So if you're in your career and you have to tell your spouse or your family, as for the next 2 weeks, I've got to be involved in this project at work, you're not going to see me much. And then on the flip side, if something happens on the personal side or some important event comes up, you've built up capital with your employer, or if you self-employed, to say, I'm going to be taking time off here because this important personal event is happening. And as you work through both of those, I think that's where you find your time is more maximized, or what you said earlier with my book, it's more optimized.
Yeah. Stephen Covey wrote about that 40 years ago, and he wrote about what he called I don't know if it was in the book or if it was in a lecture, but I used to teach the 7 Habits and to corporations, and one of the things we talked about was the relational bank account. First it was called the emotional bank account, and then we turned it to the relational bank account, which is just right on the same target as what you're talking about, and that you have credits and debits in your relational bank account, and you've got to build up your credits for when you take your debits, because you don't want to take your relationships into the red.
Correct. And that takes time and effort, which this whole bit about using and planning your time, it's got to be proactive instead of reactive, because if it's reactive, then you may manage that well in that time that you're doing it. But when you're proactive and you try to anticipate maybe what life is going to be like, then it gives you an opportunity to adapt more and not react when those changes happen.
My wife and I have an activity. It doesn't, but it's an interesting activity. We've done it for decades. I don't know how long we've done it for decades, but the week between Christmas and New Year's, we take 2 days and 3 nights, and we go off somewhere. Sometimes it's a hotel local, or sometimes it's just down 100 miles south of us. But what we do is, besides having fun, going to movies, doing whatever we want to do, we take a time and we answer 3 questions. What kind of husband or wife was I last year? What do I need to do differently to make your life better? And then the third question is, what do we want to do this next year? And so it has to do with vacations, family outings. There could even be some tasky kind of goals. But we get real clear so the two of us are in sync for the rest of the year.
You just touched on something so critical, and that is, if you have a spouse or partner, as you think about your post-career or retirement life, both of you need to be doing this together.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you're attached at the hip for the entire thing, because each of us have our own personal unique pursuits. But it's when I work with couples on the front end that they realize they haven't talked to each other about really the details that they want to do in retirement, even to the point of where one spouse wasn't even aware the other spouse wanted to retire later on in life. One spouse expected, hey, we're both going to retire at 65, we're close in age, we're going to go do things. Having those detailed discussions like you and your wife have done really brings a lot of clarity to the lifestyle strategy.
Yeah, to the lifestyle, to everything about your life. Let's circle back a bit to the purpose statement. And I had asked you, because I think so many people have never written a purpose statement, never written a mission statement, a vision statement, whatever you want to call that, but something for your life. Do you have one that you could quote to our people? See, mine is not, I couldn't quote it, but I could say it in a sentence. But what would you say your purpose statement looks like?
My purpose statement is simple and yet complex in the sense that it is, I want to make the most of the time that I have that God has given me.
Yeah.
And when I remember that and flow through the lens, then I can simply say, is this thing that I'm planning, this activity, is that going to make most of my time? And is it going to tie me back? In my case, as a religious person, is that going to tie me back to being something productive that God could look at and say, that makes sense? And so that becomes the flow of which then, I don't say I do everything through that lens. I can certainly improve. It's certainly there in the back of my mind when something important I want to do comes to the surface.
Yeah, to give listeners, I don't have, mine is not that clean, although I could write it and it would be that clean. But mine is to perform as an elder in society, giving kindness, inspiration, and the permission to have an imagination. That's what I'm all about.
And that's powerful because, again, you have those key attributes that you get to challenge yourself with if you choose to do something, to say, am I going to derive that level of what I needed from my mission statement or vision statement, purpose? Am I going to accomplish that out of that? And that really helps you bring clarity to your planning.
It does. It really does. And you added two things. When I asked you the question, when we had a chat earlier this week, I asked you, how do you approach this personal purpose statement? And you had two elements that I thought that I just loved, Dave, were really good. And you said you have to ask yourself two questions, and there's way more than two, but two questions that are really vital. What are your unchangeable ethics and values? I had never thought of that, and that is, I can't believe I never thought about that, because if you knew my lifestyle, it's shocking that I didn't think about that. And secondly, what brings you satisfaction? You answer those two questions. How are you hardwired? What do you need to do to align with your personal ethics and values? And then your pleasure component. What gives you satisfaction? And your pleasure component can be working, can be producing, can be giving something, to contributing to society. That can give you great satisfaction. But if you answer those two questions, that takes you a long way. I think your questions take someone a long way into the personal purpose statement, Dave. I think that's really good.
Thank you. And the idea is for you to be focused in two areas. Number one, focus internally, because you got to figure out what's important to you. But I also really want to encourage people heading into post-career life is also think outwardly, because if you look at your life, and if you're in career now and you've got a successful career, when you hit retirement, if you again, cold turkey, and say, I'm going to go without working, your social connections drop by 50% at least. So if you
If
you haven't developed a strong internal ethics and satisfaction component, then your world can get very small very quickly, and you can retreat like millions of retirees do, end up really retreating from society. And I think what a waste for these people if they become so socially isolated. Not only do they suffer, but I think we suffer as well, because we don't have access to the knowledge and the experience and the benefits that they could bring the rest of society.
Oh, we're a society without elders. And there's several factors that come together to make that true. But we need the wisdom of elders without not telling people what to do, as much as here's been my experience when I tried something like that. And just giving feedback. Too many times people view the role of elder as not advice giver, but as laying down the law. And that just doesn't work with adults. That worked when they were 7 years old, but that doesn't work when they're 37 years old.
Right. And I like your idea of integrating the term of elder into it, because that then draws us. It it encourages us to draw the knowledge out of them, not us or retirees forcing our knowledge on others because we think we're better.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, yeah. And that is the curse of old age. You can either take the blessings of old age and just say, I've learned, I've experienced, and now let me just live out my experience, or you can take it and think I'm cooler than everybody else. And we have both. You know what I want to do before we head into break time? I want to get a little bit, I'm looking at the way I've organized this, and I think because we're talking planning, I want to talk a bit about how the purpose statement exercise actually prepares people for the financial side of the equation. If they have you've got it. I want you to run with it.
So what pops into my head there is, so that purpose then empowers not only you, but if you have a financial professional, it empowers them to help you act.
Right.
So many times when you meet with advisors, a typical advisor has some type of models that they run. And typically, depending on their level of detail or sophistication, it's usually a questionnaire that you fill out that then derives them to some value, what they think you're going to spend per year. And then from that, they run their models, and those models tell you whether you're in an acceptable range to your risk. Where I feel that a client can help an advisor is to go deeper than many of the questionnaires. And that's where you develop what's important to you in your life. What are goals that you want to do? Travel is usually a big component related to that. A lot of times people have things that they've wanted to try that they haven't realized the cost that's involved in them. I had a client who makes furniture, and his garage became now his woodworking. He has spent thousands of dollars on equipment to make beautiful furniture that has no ROI in the real world. He doesn't care, because he makes this wonderful furniture. He may sell it, but that's not his business. It derives that satisfaction. If he hadn't spent time talking to his advisor, the advisor might say, I haven't anticipated you spending this money on that. So this is where developing the lifestyle strategy, driving into the specifics of what's going to motivate you to it, is empowering information you take back to your financial professional to align that with your goals.
Yeah, that is so true. As we're talking, I talked to you earlier, and we're talking now, and it's making me think how much self-employment helps somebody in the retirement process, because you are forced to decide what you want to do, when you want to do it, how you're going to spend your money, and you have to do that very wisely. And so I have done an annual budget that we have a personal cash flow, and we know where we stand every month, because as a self-employed person, you never know when your next paycheck's going to come in. You may be set for the next 3 months out or the next 6 months out, but after that, you have no idea. And so you've got to have a handle on your finances. And so we got to where we had actuals, we had cash flow budgets. I then took that same philosophy, Dave, and put that into retirement and retirement projections, what we would want to do, what our lifestyle costs. So we knew I'm down to within 90 to 95% of my spending I can account for in retirement. So I know I can tell I can work with my financial manager, this is what we want to do, this is the kind of money I'm looking at needing, and she can work with us on that. So that's very helpful.
And you brought up a real important point about the idea of developing a budget, because many people heading into retirement are only looking through the lens of their life as it is now. And it becomes the mindset has to change, because obviously traditional retirement, if you're going from an income producer to receiving a distribution of the money that you saved. And so one of the exercises I take clients through is to have them develop a retirement budget. Because again, financial advisor usually just asks for, what do you think your budget's going to be? And people come up with a number. And that number's usually not right.
Of course not. Of course not.
So my wife and I, for example, we have fun in that we've developed two budgets. One is a lean budget. That is, what is the bare minimum we need to live comfortably, taking care of our base expenses and around there. What is that number? And then the second number is, what is our regular budget? And it's a retirement budget that says, what are we going to want to spend extra things on related to the activities we want to do? And it empowers our financial advisors because they actually speak to us back and says, okay, you're looking great if you're on the lean budget. We need to talk a little bit about some of the things that you want to do on the regular budget that helps us. And so the more you empower yourself, the more you're going to empower any professional you have helping you.
And the lean budget is very realistic. If you have not been in a position to save to the degree that you would want to, so you're not going to have the financial resources, then you have to be looking at a simpler budget. And I think that's really wise. You know what I do? I want to continue on. I've got tons of questions. I want to get into your retirement time analysis. But I want to do that after a break. So let's take a quick break, and we'll come right back and do RTA. Hi there, this is Charlie Hedges, and you're listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie and my very special guest, David Buck. And we're talking about, David has a new book that is The Time Optimized Life. Did I get that right? I'm looking at The Time Optimized Life. And that he talks about, he's not just talking about retirement, but optimizing your entire life, no matter how old you are, in the sort of tasks and things that you want to do. But he also has this retirement process tool that he's developed. It's called the retirement time analysis. And Dave, you told me about that you created that to manage your life, and the process became so helpful to you that you turned it into a process that you give to your customers. Tell me about the RTA, or the retirement time analysis.
Sure. It's an assessment tool. First, as you said, it was first derived on my own personal journey. A couple years ago, my wife and I were with our financial advisors, and I didn't know my wife was going to ask this, but she said, what if Dave retired tomorrow? And when they gave us basically
That's
the
a
thumbs
great
up,
question, by the way.
What's that?
I said that's a great question.
It is, because it hit me over the head like a sledgehammer when our advisors said, we would prefer you wait, but if you needed to, yes, you could. And then that was like, what would I do with all that time? So as part of my business, I was working exclusively with people in their career, helping them improve how they use their time in career. Maybe I can use some of the same principles that I've created and used with career clients. Let me go on my own personal journey to see what post-career would be like. And as I went through that, and I was finding things out, and I was asking people in my age group, I found that I hadn't thought about that either. And so I took the basis for that and created the retirement time analysis, the foundational document for people to be able to unpack for themselves where maybe their strengths and opportunities are when it comes to creating a lifestyle.
Just give me a little bit. How does it work?
In effect, people answer a series of scenarios that I put forth with them, and this was not just what I thought in my head, but it's literally after researching all kinds of articles, books, periodicals, podcasts. I found common themes coming to the front out of that. And so as you answer those scenarios, you'll receive an assessment back on 7, though I don't call the 7th one directly out, but I'll answer that first, and that's longevity. The idea of how long do you think you're going to live? And that might sound a little awkward, but that can be a basis for some really aha moments in the fact that if you're 55 years of age and you think you're going to live till 100, you still got a lot of years left over. You're going to have to figure out what that means. So we start there. Then the other 6 categories, I have what I call the 3 mindset categories. There's career mindset. How do you feel about your career? There's the flip side of that, retirement mindset. What's your perception of retirement? Because many people look at retirement as a dirty word. But what's your perception behind that? And then you have financial mindset. This is, do you believe what's in front of you? Are you too aggressive or are you too conservative in what you've been able to accumulate? Then after the 3 mindsets, you have time management, because again, it's different in post-career life than it is in career. Your anticipated lifestyle, and then finally the last category is what many people gravitate to first, and what are your planned activities?
Yeah. You got to get there someday. If somebody wants to go there first, fine. But they'll understand after they go through the other parts of the process, that's going to change or be influenced by going through the other parts of your process will really help define that 6th one.
And make it a lot more broader than what you probably might be initially thinking.
Let me tell you a story of a guy. I've given this self-image that I was ready for retirement and I jumped right in, and I started off with a bang, but I did not. My retirement came as it was medical. It was that everybody in the show knows that I've always been a manic depressive and have medications that have dealt with that really well, but I didn't have it one time when I was 65, and my manic started creating anxiety attacks, and I was a consultant, and so I'm sitting there talking to CEOs of very large companies, and I noticed myself starting to stutter. No one else could see I stuttered. No one else could tell, but I could tell. And it was just horrifying, and I realized I can no longer do this. I can't do this. And so it was like for my own choice of medical reasons, and we were in a position where I didn't have to work, and I stopped working. And I want to tell you, bro, those were 2 years, 2 very difficult years, and I suffered from 2 issues. One was uselessness, and the other was boredom. I'm used to a full calendar, always having something. I didn't have something to do all the time. I wasn't prepared for that. And I didn't know how to be useful with my strong gift taken away from me. What do I do? And I got to tell you, I figured that out. And when you said earlier, and then I want you to respond, when you said earlier that retirement is a bad word, I love being retired. I do so many activities that are so cool. I help people. I help organizations. I travel. We are very philanthropic. We have our rituals and routines that we do. It's a beautiful time. It's a wonderful time. But boy, I tell you what, those first couple of years with that uselessness and boredom, yikes. Have you had other people talk to you about uselessness and boredom?
Very much. And the challenge for many people, and I would say particularly men, is that there's this sense of guilt. Like, why am I feeling this way? And almost shame to talk about it, because it's like, why, if they're going to look at me and I'm retired, yet I'm struggling with depression and I'm struggling with boredom, and many times that leads to substance abuse and things like that. And it's hard for people because it's like, everyone's looking at me like I got this great retirement life, and yet I'm struggling. So it's a reality, and I really want to encourage people that retirement life is not necessarily going to present itself as resort living every day. And that's where you have to figure out, what am I going to do outside of the resort living time that I'm going to be engaged in?
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, once you do figure out something, once you do figure out a plan, and get your teeth into doing something meaningful, it changes everything. For me, it was getting involved in charities that turned around my whole uselessness deal. And then boredom, two things happened. I started finding activities, and then I also got comfortable. I got comfortable with nothing to do. It's what I get from the late medieval Christian mystics, and that's just this time of solitude and silence, and not worrying about always having to do and accomplish things. It's more about being, in essence, and reading and writing.
And that is extremely hard in a digital society that we live in, for us to be able to stop and do the quiet time. And that's something I'm personally trying to do much better at now, because my mind is always thinking of something, and I'm like, if I don't write this down, next great idea that's going to save the world is going to go away. Probably not. Own the quiet time and the solace, because your mind's going to be more clear later on anyways, or when the real next new idea comes along.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's well put. I'm looking at the RTA. I lost my notes. I didn't lose my notes. I just got off my note page. I'm curious, what kind of rituals do you have? Religious rituals or personal rituals? Do you do anything like that?
Yeah, so for me personally, my religious principles, my rituals are going to be a key part, I feel, of my life, particularly as I head into retirement. Every Sunday is my ritual of church and worship, and the idea not only do I get to commune with God there, but there's social connection that I need, because I recognize I am a high introvert. My default is to say I want alone time, and I actually have to flip that around to say I need to force myself to be with people, because of the natural benefits that we get from being in community with each other. So that's definitely ritual. And then for me, another element which is tied to my faith walk, but that's my own personal care too, that I am devoting time, the exercise that I need for the quiet time, for prayer, for activities outside of what I normally like to do to challenge me. One of the things the past couple of years, my wife, I've never danced my entire life, fought against it, till our oldest got married, and my wife said, I am not going to have you at the wedding standing in the corner not dancing. And so she forced me. And that was, not only physically was I doing things, but just challengingly me mentally to think of things differently. And those are the avenues, new experiences, and things like that to keep life fresh. Those are the rituals that I want to carry on with me for as long as I can till the day I die.
That's very cool. Yeah, those are really wonderful. I get the introvert. I'm a strong introvert myself. So you are. Are you a Myers-Briggs person?
I am.
So you're an INTJ?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That goes with studying the tool, studying the assessment for forever. That just after 15 minutes of conversation, I can usually type someone. And we just said that he's a global thinker, and that he's very organized and structured, and he gets energy from the interior, not as much from the exterior. So that just
very fair. I have the analogy that I use with people, particularly since my corporate career was in sales. I would tell people that I worked with, I said, gang, in the morning the gas tank is filled, And then by the evening, my gas tank is empty. So if I'm not going out for a drink afterwards, it's not because of the company. It's because I just got to go back and recharge.
Yeah. You know what I call it? I call it that we have a pinhole leak in our battery.
Oh, that's good, too. I like that.
That one just, that at some point it runs out and I just say, I'm done. I'm over with this. Yeah, ritual is very important to me, Dave. My listeners are familiar, but I have every morning I do a brief inspirational reading. I do 20 minutes of meditation, that's Zen-like meditation, and then I journal, and I will journal for at least 30 minutes. And then after that, I clean up, and then I go into my prayer room, and I do what's called Lectio Divina. It's reading the Bible for inspiration, not information. And there's this little meditation process around reading Scripture, and I do that. And then, because I'm not Roman Catholic, I can give myself communion. And I give myself communion every day. My Paul is shaking his head. He's the Catholic guy here. But my spiritual director is the abbot of a Catholic community, and so he gives me permission. He says, you can do whatever you want to do. But that happens every day. And it is so settling. And now if I have to miss a day, I'm on a cruise or I'm out doing something where I miss a day, I don't get weirded out because I miss a day. I just miss a day. But I really believe in the power of ritual.
And that's some powerful rituals that you have established. And while I don't necessarily, when I work with clients, there's no requirements that I work with them based upon their spiritual journey or their religious views. But I do really emphasize to people, and I think you accomplish that in what you do with your rituals, is there is that internal component, but then there's that external component. You're reaching out outside yourself, and that helps, I think, bring fullness to your life. Because again, if you're going to go traditional retirement and not going to work, your world will naturally become smaller. And if you don't have, like you said, those defined rituals, you will find yourself socially isolated in circumstances where you become too comfortable in that. It's detrimental because you're just not engaging outside of yourself enough to get some stimulation and variety in your life.
Oh yeah, I so agree with you, and it is so vital. I think we're becoming a non-churched nation, but I don't think spirituality, the hunger for spirituality has gone away with people not going to church. They're still feeling that need, and I think the more that people can access that sort of personal desire for some kind of intimacy with a power greater than them. That's why I love the late medieval Christian mystics of John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila and Julian of Norwich and Bonaventure and St. Francis of Assisi. Those people, they had one goal in mind, Dave, and that was intimacy with the divine. And I use the word divine because it doesn't have to be necessarily, I don't push that people have to believe Christianity like I do, but there is a divine source. There is something out there. And intimacy with that something really helps give purpose and meaning to life.
You took the words out of my mouth, because I was just thinking that's the idea of purpose, so that things aren't tied necessarily to what you're doing on the professional side of your life. You can still do that. I think whatever vocation you choose to have, that can be derived. You can get some great spiritual benefit out of that just by simply doing things well and tying it back to what's important in your life. The idea then that you're investing time, and this is the key that I try to tell people, is you have to invest time to get good quality time. And so if you're just reacting to the distractions that come at us from this digital and society that we live in, then you're reacting. You've got to stop for a period of time consistently to say, what do I have to do to reset, to then proactively look at what my life's going to be like?
Very cool. I think that is so bang on. Tell you what, we have taken our time, and I still have another hour of questions for you. I do want to say that there's one thing, an audience that you focus on that I think is good. The people listening to this podcast need to understand that we are not just talking about currently retired people or people that are going to retire in a couple of years, but you're working with people like in their 40s, 50s, and early 60s about preparing for retirement. I think that is so helpful. If you're thinking about that long before, a decade before you actually hit retirement and you've been working on your financial portfolio, then chances are good that you're going to start off really well.
Correct. And I've challenged people to say, if you want to retire at, say, 65, start lifestyle planning at 55.
Yeah.
And it's not that you have to map out exactly what your life is going to be like. It goes back to those mindsets. It's you reconciling and understanding what is your career mindset. Because if it's really important to you, you may want to have some element of work for the rest of your life. Likewise, if you have a negative feeling about retirement, unpack that. And it not to say you have to flip and say all of a sudden retirement's wonderful, but then to redefine what retirement is for
That's
you,
it.
if it's
Yes.
not a hard stop. And so you're looking at that life is something that's positive for you. And I have actually had clients, after they've developed their lifestyle strategy, and they're like, this is cool. I think I've got something I can adapt with, because again, it's going to change. Then I say, okay, are you financially viable? Yeah, I'm financially viable now. I say, well, why wait? So if you're 60 years old, what are you waiting to 65 for?
Yeah.
Start that life now if you can.
That's a great idea. I think there's so many things. I think what you're bringing to the table is going to help so many people. And it helps not only people who are retiring, but just imagine, as you do, I'm asking our audience to imagine if you're thinking this way when you're 30, and you're thinking about a personal mission statement and goals and objectives and saving, even though retirement sounds like it's not ancient, but it's so far in the future. But the little bit you save now goes a long way. But just if people take advantage of what you're bringing to the table with your book, The Time Optimized Life, then they're going to step right into this process really easily.
And it becomes a continuous self-evolving process. It never ends.
It's another season. And we have to, it's not the end of anything. It's another season.
Very true.
And we always have a season. Dave Buck, you've been very cool. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I always feel that the time flew by, so at least I had a good time, and let's hope the listeners does as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I had a good time too. Let's hope. I'm sure the listeners will love it. You were great. Okay, I want to thank all our listeners for tuning into the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.